Welcome everyone to our regularly scheduled Board of Ethics meeting, January 14th. And Lisa, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Ted Carlson?
Here.
Terrence Kelly?
Here.
Kathleen King?
Here.
David Nesbitt?
Here.
Becky Wendt?
Here.
Also here is Dee Ennis, Deputy Municipal Attorney, Lisa Toussaint, Administrative Hearing Officer, Lisa Slusner, Deputy Municipal Clerk. We have a quorum.
And do we, before we approve the agenda, do we have something to move around in the agenda?
Yeah, I'll move that we move item 7B, and we move that to after item 4.
Okay, so I assume there's no objection from anybody. All right, motion approved, and we'll deal with that after we get done with the minutes, which we can review right now. Does anybody need time to review the minutes, or can we move through those now? The minutes from the previous, it's just the last meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
In December? Okay. Any objection to approving the minutes from the last meeting? Hearing no objections, they're approved. So now we'll get into 7B, which is the response to request for advisory opinion 2015-7. And this is remind me again, this is a public document, is
Yes,
that right?
at this point.
So this is not a confidentiality issue, and so
No.
we're going to remain in open session at this time. All right. So at this point, let me hand it over to Ms.
Okay,
Ennis.
and I can really briefly, at the last meeting, this is about the mayor's
did I say
travel,
first?
travel to Wichita, and then a couple of employees as well. And at the last meeting, Lisa had suggested, Toussaint had written a draft, had provided us with a draft, and we did some minor tinkering, but then I suggested, I thought there was still a two-part analysis, that it was not only exemptions or exceptions under the code, but also an undue influence analysis.
Mm-hmm.
But when Lisa went back to the code, I think that's not true. So if we quick look at the code, and Lisa can outline that, I think, and we do one at a time, do the elected officials ones. And the long and the short of it, I'll just say, is that in both those sections in different ways said, and the board doesn't retain jurisdiction over this. It's not that they're safe harbor, it's just that we're not going to deal with it. So unlike a safe harbor where you do have to do that second analysis, might be a safe harbor, we still want to make sure that it's not undue analysis. Under both these sections, the employee and the elected officials, which are written differently because we revised one and didn't revise the other one, that says that the travel for the employees and the travel for the elected officials are outside of the code. Therefore, when Lisa talked to me, I don't think we do have to do that second step analysis because it's simply, this is outside of the code. So why would we try to do that analysis? The whole idea of exempting the employees when we did our code rewrite was, when there's an IT contract that says 2 of our employees are going to go down to Las Vegas for a week and learn about the programming, that we don't have the ability to second guess that. And it's in a lot of our contracts.
We
the board.
The board.
We really don't have the ability, and that should be an administrative decision that the city should supervise their employees and where they're going on business trips. And in fact, there are a lot of rules. And so when we rewrote the employee gift code section, that was the intent. It wasn't that we would say, okay, city, you look at whether they're following your rules, but we're still going to look at whether there's an undue influence analysis here. So I think my suggestion at our last meeting that both of these deserved a two-step analysis was actually incorrect when Lisa brought it up to me today. So that we did not put in a second, and that was entirely my suggestion, because I was thinking of the safe harbors when we said, even if it's a safe harbor, we're still going to look at undue, but the safe harbor were things like gifts under $50 and food and stuff. It wasn't these areas where we really recognized that the board should not be involved in employee travel if the employee travel met the administrative rules.
Okay, it's really just a simple kind of a plain language analysis. So if you look, breaking it down into 2 parts, looking first at for Woods and Bill Evans because they're in their own special vote category, and then secondly looking at Mr. Halpro and Mr. Shooters as municipal employees. We'll take it one at a time. If you just take a look at the ethics code that applies to elected officials, which is 115.035, and look at that section. I think it is section O that we have been paying our attention, focusing our attention on. If everyone has it.
Yes.
If you look specifically at, the introductory language, which is, I think, where D was originally focusing our attention. The introductory language under gift says an elected official may not solicit or accept a gift if it can be reasonably inferred that the gift is intended to influence the elected official's independence of judgment in the exercise of official duties. And I think D's original plan was we're going to analyze that. We're going to look at that is there undue influence in this particular instance. But when you look further down to the express exemption under section, look at number 3, O3, it says these unsolicited gifts are allowed, provided that if the disclosure is required, the gift disclosure form is timely filed with the municipal clerk within 30 days of receipt of the gift. And then you've got section little h, which is where the analysis was centered last time. There is no need, and it really wouldn't even be appropriate to look at the undue influence section because it simply does not apply for these enumerated items that appear under, I guess, O, 3, A through H. So as we started looking at it, we realized, we really should set some type of precedent by doing an analysis that we don't need to do. So that is simply the analysis with regard to Mayor Berkowitz and Assemblyman Mr. Evans. And then if you look at, for the municipal employees, it's, a similar type of outcome through a slightly different means. Just look at the provisions that apply to municipal employees at 1.15025 H. If you take a look there, if everyone's ready for it. Becky, do you want me to say
And this is what we need to be careful that the rewrite is in your section that should reference safe harbors.
Because it's kind of a newly added
It's a newly,
section, right?
And this is the part that we worked on.
Yeah, sorry, I was
Mhm.
just distracted by looking at the in-state, which is not in state nature, small enough there.
Hope you have what we have. And it's a section that is just titled gifts. And again, it applies to the municipal
Yep, there we go.
employees. Okay.
Do you see the word safe harbors in there, a couple of things down?
So I think what he was originally
Okay.
thinking is there's a general rule under H2 which says that a municipal employee may not accept a gift from an individual or an entity with interest that may be substantially affected by the performance of the person's official municipal duties under circumstances where the timing and nature of the gift would cause a reasonable person to question the person's judgment in exercising official municipal duties. So it's this general rule about when a gift is not allowed. And then the safe harbor provision, which I think is where Dee was originally thinking, we're under the safe harbor provision, it says, unless other factors of influence are present, an employee may accept the following items. And so we were thinking, okay, you can accept the travel, but only where other factors of influence are not present. And that factors of influence sort of analyzed under the general rule language. But we realized we're not even under the safe harbor provision. We're under H6. Which is totally outside the scope of the safe harbor, totally outside, special, separate from the general rule, and it says travel discounts unless specifically referenced in the section. Items such as employee travel discounts, vendor provided accommodations and training, and payment of employee registration fees shall not be governed by the ethics
There we
code at all.
go. Yeah, I
But
see.
shall be, they're outside the scope. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't change anything. As we got into this, I realized unnecessary superfluous analysis.
Yeah.
I will say that I did make a slight change that has nothing to do with any of that after talking with Dee. And I don't know how you guys have, do like to do things, but I always felt a little bit funky about, all the information that we relied on in putting together the ethics opinion was the information that was really provided to us by the complainant and by Ms. Leek Green and other information that they submitted. So their testimony that they gave when they came to the board, and then also other written information they distributed. And I thought, we really didn't do our own independent analysis of who is the Rasmussen Foundation. Are they truly, in fact, as Ms. Green represented? I have no reason to believe that she wasn't totally correct. I believe she was. But, she said that it was not a private development company, would not have any types of interests that would be, really, they wouldn't benefit from any decision-making that the mayor might make as a result of this meeting and whatnot. I thought, we're taking all that on faith as true. And he said, that you guys used to include certain language in your advisory opinions that would provide kind of a clarification. I'm taking the facts that have been presented to us as basically true. And so I added a little blurb, a little kind of precautionary blurb that appears just on the first page, right before the section, caption testimony and evidence presented. And it really just says, hey, we didn't do our own independent investigation. We relied on the information provided to us. If any of that stuff wasn't true, then, this opinion is...
Did you take that from our previous opinion?
I did.
Yes.
He gave me something, and
Yeah.
I think it's really good.
Yeah.
Because, we are out there doing this huge independent factual analysis. Remember when we all tried to figure out, who Chris Schutte and Andrew Melville work for, and,
Right.
what the heck is the economic, who are they? Well, we don't dig in
Right.
hugely, so I think it's important to put something
Yeah.
in there. Or at least a good idea.
There's a little typo there in the second. Did you catch it?
Sorry, no, I didn't
Oh.
see it.
Which one?
Right.
Which
The
sorry,
board
sorry.
did not undertake an independent
Yep.
investigation. rather than
Okay.
an.
Do you see that?
Thank you.
Where?
Continue.
I trust you.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's
And then
that's
the
it,
other,
kinda.
the only other change is just the language in that paragraph. Nevertheless, to more fully inform the public
Oh,
about
yes.
these issues, you agreed that the Board of Ethics treat the as a request for advisory opinion.
Yeah. We
You're right,
talked-
because it wasn't submitted as a request. Is that sure?
Jay and I talked about that, and because one wasn't, we thought this would be an easy conversion language.
Now, if the clerk's office has an objection to that, then I would file a request
Okay.
for advisory opinion.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so that's just procedural, not substantive
No, it's
to the
not.
rest of the.
Nothing has really.
Everything else is the same.
And I think there was just one word on the last change statute and code to laws,
Yeah.
which is that's right.
And then I made all Kathleen's changes
Okay.
from the last time.
Good.
Catches, and I think we
Yeah.
talked about a few things last time.
And can
Okay.
people asked if I could find the jurisdictional basis for the board looking at a public meetings, open meetings thing. And I finally gave up, but another more gifted attorney in the office found it for me. And it's actually under the public meetings law. I'll read it for the record. It's 1.25.015, which talks about that the Board of Ethics shall accept and consider complaints of violations of this chapter and may recommend a corrective action be taken. So it's in a different chapter, and so we are in charge for that, because attached to this opinion will be, well, I think, Lisa, that the thing you did on public on the synopsis you took, right? Is that going to be attached? Oh no, that's different. I take it back. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong opinion
One
altogether.
thing I think would be reminding me of one thing that we did not include. It's not that we bring include the agenda. That Suzanne provided us.
That's right. Yeah.
And
To show that they did a
and
million
my
things in
version
2
of the
days.
agenda is all written all over.
Okay.
Can we attach that?
Okay.
I think we were going to touch
All right.
Okay. And I apologize for that.
Do we have any further corrections or edits? I don't know. I don't know whether Ted can vote on this
I think
or
not.
not.
He wasn't here for all the
And
testimony. That you should be
Yeah.
part of the voting part of this. Yeah, because
no, because you were here for the testimony. But
And
Yeah.
oh, you weren't either.
so the three
Well,
of
so
you-
the three of us can vote on this. So among the three of us, or actually everybody can comment. Anybody have any other questions or comments or corrections to make at this time?
So I guess we don't want to get into then that one of the things that you point out on page 2 is that the complainant expressed concerns about access, right? The access was be afforded to local developers. And I thought one of the things that we had to sort of discover during our the testimony we received was that, which I found helpful, was that it was the Rasmussen Foundation had put together basically the invitation list, and that working with these developers and having them on the trip was basically necessary to forward the public policy goal of learning something from this trip to create more affordable housing. That would be indeed, how did you put it, superfluous analysis, right? But I found it helpful, and I thought, here's a citizen who complained, and if I were average Joe citizen, that's the kind of stuff I would sort of be getting some heartburn about. And our analysis right now basically says, well, the code basically says we can't say much about that, so we move on. And I was just thinking, to some degree, we can say more in that, while there's not a kind of like, specific point in the code you could point to. Certainly, the spirit of the code is this idea of sort of like transparency and maintaining public trust. There's actually various points in the preamble you can point to that. And what I felt after Fleck's testimony was Fleck Green's testimony was that actually I had a lot less heartburn about that his administration was not involved in putting that list of invitees together, and that I could see the reason why it was necessary to have those people on the trip. And so I was thinking, last meeting I thought we talked a little bit about having a little blurb, even just a paragraph that would go in somewhere to that effect.
Terry,
And
can
I
I?
do not want to get into that, and that's
Terry, can I suggest if you look at page 2, under B, the second full paragraph, it touches on this.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But just see if there's another
Yeah.
line or two that you'd want to throw in there.
You're right, it does talk about how the invite list and the itinerary were
That's right.
prepared
By the foundation.
not by,
Foundation is not a development company. You.
Well, at any rate, take a look at this.
Is this your
I
paragraph?
actually did my homework. Yeah, but I did it this morning. We got in late last night, so I was half asleep when I did this. So take it for what it's worth. But this is sort of, and to some degree, you're right. I mean, to some degree, it just sort of takes the stuff that the information that we got from Suzanne, and just sort of like converts that from that to a kind of assessment, saying and maybe it could go at the end
I was
of
going to say just at the end of this paragraph, don't you think?
either this one or just at the end of 1A, maybe, like where we're analyzing.
Okay.
So we go through and say, hey, look, the code, doesn't, and then
Do we?
maybe stick it right there.
concern, am I allowed to speak?
Yes.
The only concern that I would have about referring to the spirit of the code is I think we have to dig into that a little bit more. And I do think the spirit of the code is reflected in some of that preliminary language that Dee and I were looking at this morning. And I think we need to decide whether we're going to get into that preliminary language or not, because I think that is what the spirit of the code is reflected. Unless I'm wrong about that, and you guys are far more experienced, I think, with this code than I am, seasoned with it. That would be my concern.
So add a
It
little.
seemed like that you need to provide a little more foundation for it. So, all these facts are good.
Terry, can I suggest is at the B2, the second paragraph after the first sentence. Hold on, this is okay. I was going to say your last paragraph, your last sentence. The developers were present at the invitation of the Rasmussen Foundation. Now, see, that's our conclusion, so never mind. So never mind.
And this is only a point about the alleged open meeting act violation, right? I mean, their argument is the presence of the private developers gave them an undue amount of access to a not publicly noticed gathering of public officials, right? So it would be something that would involve that would belong somewhere in issue 2 analysis, right?
Because they weren't invited.
Well, I think Terry's talking about access, like the mayor's ball.
Like the mayor's ball. That's the one I have in mind.
I would-
But it wasn't our trip;
It's
it
about the
was their
presence.
trip. I mean, it
Well,
was
and that's right, and that's
Rasmussen's.
and in some sense, I mean, that's sort of like, and again, I think both the complainant had this point that there was the open meetings point, but there was also this sort of like this broader concern about like, hey, either you're providing access to between the mayor and developers for this, on this private jet on this long trip. Doesn't that undermine public trust? Doesn't that undermine one's sense of impartiality and preserving, putting the public good first, and all, which is all in the preamble right now. All that kind of language is in the preamble of the code, and I think that's the intuitive kind of concern the citizens might have, not the let's get into the nuts and bolts of the Open Meetings Act and see whether it's actually falling within the jurisdiction of the board. I think the average citizen kind of looks at it and goes, that just if you get a 2-sentence, 3-sentence summary of the trip, there's something that maybe smells a little bit fishy. And at least for me, what I found is that when we dug a little bit, there was more smoke than there was fire. That you actually look at the details of what happened, just from this intuitive sense, I felt like, oh, okay, this is actually not offensive to even the spirit of the code, let alone the specific details of that law. Now, we don't have to get into that, and again, I thought,
see, my concern, that I think Lisa's right. If you start down that path, then you're going to go down.
Do we need that sentence?
Which one? No,
So, meaning what it could read is, some concern was raised about the presence of private local developers on your fact-finding trip. However, the developers were present at the invitation of the Rasmus Foundation, not your administration. And their presence was important, perhaps even necessary, given the overall policy goal of creating more affordable housing in Anchorage. And then insert it after the second paragraph in section B as its own sentence.
Where would you put that? At the bottom. At the bottom.
At the bottom of section B, create its own little. Instead of trying to squeeze it into something we've already
take it out of this, however, upon further investigation business.
And just take out upon further investigation.
Yeah.
And the reason is because it within the spirit.
Yeah, you gotta be careful about that.
You gotta be careful about that writing, and then also. The board found this to be acceptable. Well, obviously we're finding it acceptable because we're agreeing to it here. I don't know that it's necessary to pontificate that way. We can just go straight into our decision is the developers were present and necessary given the blah, blah, blah. That's just a
Purely
thought.
structural perspective, I think that makes more sense. Because I think if we put in a board finding with respect
Right.
to the spirit and letter of the ethics code under the testimony
Right.
and evidence presented, then that doesn't make any sense.
Right. But I think it's a good point
Then we need
to address. I mean, I like the fact that it's getting in there, but without making it part of a conclusory, this is what we found based on fact-finding, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's right. Because if you look
Right.
at because again, my
See, it doesn't really
potential
fit
concern
in
is that
A.
again, at the top of page 2, we present the complainant's objection, and it's not presented even here as necessarily being simply an open meetings objection. It's a complaint about access and development
Right.
of special relationships that might be profitable for these developers in the future. And then in some sense, we never address that. What we then give is, and not to be offensive, a highly legalistic and technical way of saying, well, we're actually not allowed to talk
Right.
about that stuff. Which is fine, and that's maybe the kind of opinion that I just want to say.
No, but I mean, but this addresses
insofar as how might the average citizen,
Right.
what would the average citizen be concerned about?
Right.
Like this complainant, they're also going to be concerned not about the technical issue of what the Open Meeting Act required, but was there in fact undue and an improper, an arrangement created that created undue influence. And again, my view is that we found that there really wasn't, and that
Anyway,
Right.
and that it's maybe worth saying that.
Right,
somewhere.
technical and substantive.
Did Ms. Flickgreen testify to that effect? I mean, the question again is sort of where this fits in the analysis,
Yeah.
because by including it here, we're effectively saying she testified.
It doesn't fit there.
That,
Oh, it doesn't?
that this
I don't
is-
think
yeah.
so.
Okay.
This is, Becky's right, this is just about what she
testimony.
said.
Yeah.
Oh, and she didn't say that.
This feels
Yeah,
that-
You're right.
I
He
mean,
is. Well, she
You're right.
did say that, but then we'd have to
Right.
change this. Like this language is conclusive. Because I asked her this point blank, because this is what I was doing.
Right.
And I was like, who came up with that? Who came up with
What's
the
that?
list? Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
That's a good point. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
what you could do is say that Ms. Blake
Right.
emphasized that developers were present.
Right.
You could add that as her.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
if you guys wanted to, if
clarification
the
on what
spirit
she said.
thing kind of like really
Yeah.
really bugs you, we could add it as that. We could. In fact, we could even say that she went so far. We could say that she addressed those concerns by noting that it was the Rasmussen Foundation, not the administration, that had created the invitation list, and the importance of having those developers to further the public
So
policy. We could present, which would be totally
Yeah.
truthful, where you could present it sort of as
Yeah.
her. Now that wouldn't have quite the same.
Right.
But again, we can't get into that analysis.
Yeah, because I think we need to do the complete analysis if we're going to do that analysis. If we're going to say they allege something that was a violation of the preamble of the ethics code, then there's my legalistic brain speaking. But
Right.
we would need to say an issue is
Right.
this part of the code that addresses sort of the general sense of trust in access to elected officials, and then we have to go into analysis and say, based on this testimony, we determined that wasn't there. But it seems like we could address the point in a roundabout manner by doing exactly what was suggested, by putting in at the end of paragraph B
And then
a
saying-
note that we inquired about this, or you guys inquired about this, and that she clarified that the developers were present at the invitation for Ethics and Foundation, not the administration. Their presence was essential to the mission of the trip,
Okay.
and then put that in there
Yeah.
and just leave it as.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah,
sound?
that sounds fine.
Okay.
So can Lisa, can you do that and then just have
Yeah.
you review it?
Yes. I am comfortable with not putting this back before everybody. We'll insert that language.
No, I think it's great.
And then,
And can I make
no,
one other
absolutely.
one other suggestion on page 5 under municipal law? Because all of us wondered why in the world we were all dabbling around in the public meeting ordinance. If after that, although the goals of the municipality's public meeting ordinance is maybe footnote
Mhm.
that word, I guess, or I don't know, maybe at the end of the next paragraph. But footnote that and reference the code section that says the ethics board is.
Yes.
That we
And I'll
have
give you that.
reversing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That sounds good to me too.
That sounds great.
Why are
Okay.
we mucking around in a horrible area of law?
So I would recommend. I guess we're in the open room. Are we ready to approve this with the changes that we've discussed here? Anybody have any objection to that? Okay, so I move to approve this letter and then disseminate it to the appropriate parties with the changes that we've discussed here today. Any objection to that?
No objection.
Any further comments, Bunny? I guess we've already had a commentary period, but assuming that's ended, anybody have any objections to approving this? No. All right.
I have one statement.
Yes.
Weren't we, maybe it was prior administration, but in a situation like this, they were supposed to get approval, I think, from the ethics board prior to doing anything like this. And
What they did is they submitted documents to who did
clerk's
to the
office.
clerk's office prior to their departure.
Yeah,
So and I don't know.
it never got down there.
I think
Right.
what you're thinking of is we've had cases in the past that the mayor is involved in a contract, right? That he has a relationship with someone who's going to be bidding for a municipal contract, has that kind of potential conflict. He has to come to the board first before doing anything and work out a management plan for how to deal with that. This was different because this was
Yeah.
just a
Yeah, but this, it almost falls like the one we had with the prior administration. And that was because of that we came up with the give prior approval from the ethics board, at least.
Yeah,
Can I just say that if Lisa can show you the exact language of this particular, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure which one you're talking about.
Well, what we hired.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's political activity. This isn't political activity.
This
Yeah.
is different. Your point is really good, but I think it's covered
Yeah.
in the actual language
Yeah.
of the provisions that we cited, because
Now I know
all
what
that's
you're
really
talking
required is just disclosure,
That's
not
right.
prior approval.
And I think we
It's a
discussed
really
it.
good point.
Yeah.
I mean, and why is it
Yeah.
different? So you guys are raising some really interesting points for me, because you know some of these things I look at provisions in the ethics code and I think, well, why is this different than another provision? But my sense is that our job is to apply the code as it is, rather than getting into whether that makes sense or necessary.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Ted, but we discussed this issue at the very beginning, and I think we went over the code, the specific provision that applied to this, and we said, okay, and I think we looked at the letters that they had submitted, and they had submitted them prior to departure. So I don't think that the code required approval of it beforehand. It was just notice of. And I think it was because it was like a public notice, right? We're supposed
Yeah,
to put it on the
to
website
the
or something,
website.
if I remember. So I think we actually addressed that issue. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Okay, are we ready to move on? Good. Okay, we're moving on. Thank you, Lisa, very much. And D too. Thank you very much. This is great.
And if you'll send it to me, then I'll get it published and get it to the complainant.
Well, you're going to make your 2 revisions and send it to Dave.
That's right.
And then
That's
Dave
okay,
will
David.
forward it on to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Just for you, David, and then you'll.
Just
That's
those 2
correct.
provisions.
Yeah, and so I'll just review it one more time before giving it. That's fine.
Good.
Yeah, just send it to me.
And can I note, Mr. Morris from
Okay.
the Division of Health is here to respond to the latest request for advisory opinion. And although I know you're sitting there waiting. I don't know if we wanted to move that one up or not.
If you don't mind, I need to leave in 10 minutes, and so whatever.
So let's do
people
the
think would
consent
be most
agenda for 10
important.
minutes.
We can do
perhaps.
consent agenda. Let's see if we can get the consent agenda done
Yeah.
in 10 minutes.
Okay,
You think we can
yeah.
do that? 10
Yeah.
minutes of that?
And then we'll start that one
So do you
in.
mind waiting for 10 more
No,
minutes?
that's fine.
Okay. All right. That
Although
sounds
you're
good.
not going to be involved in this one, Ted. I mean, Terry.
Oh. Okay. So 5.
That's right.
You know, we might be able to do this one in 10 minutes, though. The request for advisory is very simple facts. Very, very simple facts. But because you may have some input into this.
Whatever.
Can I make a suggestion? Let's do
Yes.
it. Let's do it.
You want to do it?
Wherever
Yeah.
you think my input
Yeah.
would be most valuable.
I think it would be
And I know that's now created low-hanging fruit for you to say.
Okay, so where would this
in that
one
case,
be?
just leave it.
So 6C.
Okay,
All right.
6C.
So let's move 6C ahead of 5, which is the consent agenda. Anybody have any objection to moving this?
No objection.
All right.
Okay.
So
And
yes, do you want to introduce
It's
this?
nicely outlined in the paragraph.
This is 6C.
The situation is.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to start.
It's pretty well outlined there.
And this is confidential?
No, it's way.
It's been waived, so we'll stay in open session. Mhm.
And if I
All
can
right.
add, so this is
Yeah.
a current employee, a high-functioning, excellent employee on a student work visa, which is about to expire, and we can help sponsor that for her to continue in this position. The idea of the preliminary consultation is to see what that would take, because we've heard through the grapevine that that could take a lot of effort for us as a city to sponsor her. So it's not, and then I'll turn it, if I can, then turn it over to Steve. It's not the issue of whether this is a good or bad thing, but it came to the Department of Law, and I said, wait a minute, we're using your, because we're going to retain outside counsel, and I was going to do a short-term contract, and I said, wait a minute, you're using public funds to help an employee, high-functioning though she is, to be able to continue her employment with us. I'm not sure that's an appropriate use of public resources. At which time, the Health Department said, can we bring it to the Ethics Board? And this was 2 days ago, so I said, sure. So that, and I didn't know if Steve, you want to add anything real quick, or?
No, just that I think indeed brought this to our jurisdiction. I think it was argued to D that it's in the municipality's interest to retain this good employee. And we've trained her, we've got investment in her. She's an excellent, she may stay with us. She gets a work visa for a long, long time. And move up the ranks and be very. So we felt like it was at least worth investigating what's entailed in sponsoring her work visa. We find out it's going to cost $40,000. Probably won't go there, but if it's a minor cost, it may be worth the investment for the municipality to retain this valuable employee. So we wanted 1 or 2 hours of time from an immigration attorney making advice on what's basically give us the basics of what's entailed in doing this.
And so it's apart from a policy question, whether the administration could decide, hey, yeah, we think this is a great idea. I think the board is looking at, is this the use of public resources?
Well,
diversion of
Yeah.
municipal
Would this
resources.
come back after seeking an opinion from the attorney? The attorney says, yes, it will cost approximately $5,000. I don't know. I'm picking the number out of the air. $5,000. Will the issue come back to see whether it's appropriate to spend $5,000?
No, see, I think that becomes a policy decision. If we decide that it's an appropriate use of public resources, I mean, are we going to have a de minimis test here?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Is there a way for us, I guess this is the way we're asking a special question and sending this out to get more information. Because my understanding was, and I know very little about immigration law, mostly because through family members who tried to get visas here. But my basic understanding is if she wants to stay, she basically has to have a work visa unless she gets married or has some other kind of exceptional reason to stay, right? And you generally have to get your employer to sponsor your visa, right? This is my sort of rudimentary understanding, and I don't know that requires your employer to pay the full cost,
Right.
but it just requires them to sponsor you and say you have to fill a form
Right.
that says they they need you, you can't they can't hire someone who's not an immigrant who could fill the same job for certain reasons, and then they send that in with your application, right? I don't think it requires us to, as a municipality, to necessarily pay for the whole thing.
Well, yeah.
So I guess it sounds like what we're asking about is the special question, are we willing to spend a little bit of money to understand what our role would be? And then we ask the next question, which is if we have to somehow do the whole thing. Because it seems to me like it's a different question based on my rudimentary knowledge.
And a follow-up question, why do you have to hire an attorney to do this? I mean, why? It's her, she wants to stay here. I understand it's in the interest of the city, but it's especially in her interest. Why can't she go to somewhere, I don't know, I don't do immigration law either, and get the forms, figure out what it's going to take without the city having to spend any money, and then this wouldn't even be an issue. I mean, I agree. It would seem to me that it would be a couple of forms to fill out, but not an expenditure of money, unless I completely misunderstand.
I think it generally,
but because this happens all the time, and you wouldn't think that the burden would fall on an employer to expend a lot of money. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. And it's in everybody's interest. I think it's a policy decision that's in everybody's interest to be able to hire people and to be able to sponsor work visas and things like that. I can't imagine it would be a lot of money. My fear is that you'd end up spending money for not having to spend any money at all. And why hire an attorney? I mean, attorneys just complicate things, right?
I do think you usually, I don't know, again, like, my experience is based on the fact that I have an Israeli sister-in-law and I had an Israeli boyfriend at one point who also applied for a work visa, so this is like totally anecdotal, but both of them did have attorneys. I think largely because it's just a lot of complicated forms and it ends up being, you end up, at least from I also have done a couple of immigration cases for the Alaska Immigration Justice Project, and each of them, there's like all these tiny little hurdles that if you don't do them correctly, then you end up in some bucket where you never, ever, ever get your visa.
So why wouldn't she hire an attorney?
Yeah, it does seem like she could inquire of an attorney what is required specifically from us, and at least narrow our scope of whether we need to have an attorney review our narrative of what we submit, or if she's asking.
Well, I guess what from my view is, I mean, I know about 10 minutes worth of internet search, and I think there's some obligations that go part of that sponsoring employee, like if you have to lay them off, you have to fly them back to Nigeria or wherever they might come from, and so there are some obligations, and so we reached out to legal, and they said, well, we don't really have the immigration experience either. It would be great, and I suggested, what if we got an hour's worth of time from an immigration attorney so they could just sort of inform us what we're getting into, because I mean, I could spend 40 hours and be misinformed, and it's not, I'm not efficient at it. I mean, it seems like it was a good investment for us to be informed so we could make this decision. And if it turns out it's very difficult, going to take a lot of our time or money, and there's some obligations that we're not aware of that could come upon us that we may not want to go there. If we find out it's a minor cost, it's going to take 20 hours of our time and $3,000 and have an obligation to fly her back, perhaps if she gets laid off, maybe we come back to you and say, this is what we'd like to do, we want to invest this, property, use the money. I think that's the way I thought the two-stage process basically be informed. Secondly, depending on it may be an obvious decision for us, we don't need your help. There's no money, we can go for it. It's $50,000, maybe it's no brainer for us, but that's kind of the way I envision it.
So is the question on the table then, that the question to the Board of Ethics is what? Should we invest a certain amount of money to explore any advice from
Is this a diversion of municipal resources, not for public good?
And what's for this? Is the
The investing $750 in this upfront. And by the way, we reached out to an attorney, and she said I can answer your questions in less than 2 hours.
Okay.
So let's say $650 to $750.
Sure.
It's really the question about whether it's inappropriate use of any expenses to explore, to get an attorney review.
To enhance private parties.
Well, it seems like what we're asking is sort of general question. I apologize to you. I don't do this. Because basically something what we're asking right now is what does it mean for the municipality to ever sponsor an employee for a visa? Because we don't know the answer to that question legally. So to a certain degree, it's not necessarily a response specifically for this individual at this point, but it's legal advice to the municipality in general for should this issue ever come up, right? I mean, we're not looking at this woman's specific facts, circumstances, background. We're just saying, what does it mean if we want to get a work visa for someone? What liability do we take on? Is it how much is the expense? what is the role of a municipality as an employer, right? I mean,
Right, so what's learned here can be applied to any
to any
future.
employer, employee, which seems like valuable information
Right.
for us to have, because I imagine, I'm surprised it hasn't come up so far, that we had never
Yeah.
had an employee responsible for a work visa. or-
Terry, what are you looking at?
But what the council's and it's also in the request, right?
Yeah, what-
So
tell me what
it's-
section you're at.
So it's 020A7. Right, basically
Divert or
prohibited
permit.
conduct, right? Divert or permit the diversion of municipal personal time, services, vehicles, equipment, blah, 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 for a purpose unrelated to municipal business. So that's a much more narrower test than is it
Yeah.
appropriate or does it enhance the public good or something, you know.
Mhm.
It says, you know, the way Becky put it, I think just hits it right in there, that this is like an agency,
Right.
an element of the city trying to get some legal advice about an
Yeah.
employee and about its obligations it might incur by keeping this
Yeah.
employee and sponsoring this employee. So it wants to spend some, it went to legal and legal said we really don't have the expertise, so it wants to spend some money. I have
Yeah.
a hard time imagining how that's
Yeah.
not unrelated to business. Is it appropriate or is it, I think that's within administrative discretion, to be honest, about, you know, making good decisions to promote the city's good, but the ethical question is, you know, is it a boondoggle? Are you basically taking the city's money and using it for something that has nothing to do with the city's running the city's business? I think Becky, you know,
Right.
we're seeking legal advice on an employee now.
From council that normally would be handled in-house, but because it's a very specialized expertise that we
Yeah,
seek
okay.
it from somebody
Yeah.
else.
Well,
Ted.
yeah,
Oh, you gotta go, thank you.
So thank you, sorry.
Thanks for that final word.
That's very exciting. I'm off to teach professional ethics right now. So.
I don't understand why. I mean, why doesn't this individual go to immigration?
Yeah.
And that's where she has to get the visa and everything else. Okay, the only thing she's I mean, if she's asking for the municipality to sponsor her again, I mean, whoever makes that decision say yes or no. And then she goes to immigration and says, I would like to get another extend my work visa because my sponsor has requested that I do it. And why are
Yeah.
why are we
to the table?
Yeah, do you want to join us? Or?
Can you join us?
What I was going to say is, what we can do is finish the questions, let him go, and then we can have our discussion. Because right now we're kind of entering into the discussion phase. But let's finish this thought, and then see if we have any more questions for Mr. Morris. How does that sound? Okay.
So, you know, I don't know why we're even considering it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, it isn't an ethics deal. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you want to spend $750 for something that doesn't need to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what have that individual been to the immigrations yet? That's who's going to have to do it,
Mm-hmm.
not us.
But we have to sponsor her.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's ever responsible. I mean, this has happened before. Who's ever responsible for sponsoring, who writes on there, yes, we'll sponsor this person, and whether it's a department head or whether it's the mayor or whatever, or manager, whoever does it. I know the last administration, the city manager. But if he does that, then she takes that to immigrations,
Mm-hmm.
and then I mean, what good would it do to go to an attorney?
Well, could I clarify?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's working on her student visa, which we had nothing to do with. It came from the University of Minnesota, and so she came to us. She already had she had her immigration visa as a student visa. So we hired her without having to, you know. I mean, we had nothing. She was an eligible employee. We had no say in her initial visa. And now what we were saying is she would like us to sponsor her, which entails obligations on our part. We want to know specifically what those obligations are before we say yes.
Mm-hmm. For the city's information.
Right.
Not for her information, but for your information.
Right. We want to know what we're getting
Yeah,
into.
because I do think we attest to the fact that we cannot replace her position with someone who is an American citizen, and there's a certain standard in there that I would at least want to know from an attorney who works in the area, how stringent is that?
Right.
Are we accurately reflecting what
Well,
we can do?
And the liability associated with hiring an employee under these circumstances may be different. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I do know that if we lay her off, we have to fly her back to her.
That's one
country
example of
origin.
additional
You know,
liability.
I didn't spend it.
Right.
We sought legal advice.
Right.
I thought, does anybody know about this? Because it's complicated.
Right.
You know, and I spent enough time to know that we needed help.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Morris?
No.
Okay.
We don't know yet how important it is that she is somewhat irreplaceable for us, right? That she, in your view, though, is she readily replaceable? I mean, obviously she is very talented, and you've invested a lot of time in training her, so that sets her apart. And or maybe that's a question that has to be answered by an attorney, and maybe so. What you had said earlier.
I mean, that maybe I don't know how clear that is. You know, certainly we can hire. She's a sanitarian, environmental health specialist. I know there are people that qualify for that position within the municipality. There's no question about that. Whether we can hire somebody at the quality that she is, that's another question altogether.
Sure. Okay. Does anybody have any questions specifically for Mr. Morris? Just so we can let him go, and then we can discuss this.
Oh, I have one question. Do we have any sense of whether has she started the process? Like, does she talk to council or looked at her forms or anything, or she just kind of came to us first?
Well, I think she knows a lot more about it than I do.
I'm sure
And
she does,
so she knows she has to get an
Right.
initial sponsor. And so I think this question, and I know that I think the application deadline is May 1st.
Okay.
And so she's basically said, will you sponsor me? And she's told me what she knows. But again, I feel like we need to do our own due diligence and find out
Sure.
for ourselves.
Okay.
Understood.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your
Yeah,
time.
you bet.
We'll let you know as soon as we can. Yeah.
Well, if I can finish my
Yeah.
project, I have a difficult time for us to decide. Now, I would think this should have gone to the municipal attorney. And then they have a position down there that can, something where they have to get outside help, they can do that. Because if nobody has the expertise in that particular field, they can go outside and get it. Okay, that's where it should come from. And if they think that it's an ethics problem, then
That's exactly what happened. That's what
right?
happened.
He raised this.
It came to me, and I said, I'm concerned with us spending municipal funds to help this individual out when there are other people who can replace her in this position. I think it should, well, he said, what can we go to the ethics?
don't you, because the municipal attorney's office doesn't have the expertise. You're saying.
Right, exactly.
Okay. They've done it in the past 100 times. You know, this something municipal attorney will hires outside help to get the expertise they need, not the ethics.
But on municipal issues and public purpose issues, we can't just hire outside counsel for any question. Like, we could not hire outside counsel for how to assist this person. I like the distinction. It's not assisting her necessarily. It's that we need to know our obligations as an employer and our potential liabilities for all future ones as well. That makes me more comfortable versus we're putting money into helping this person who can be replaced, or that was what was sort of initially discussed. Then I'm much more comfortable, especially for 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I really see the dividing line. I think that it is a valid use of municipal resources and a question that we should validly have legal counsel on whether or not we can and what legal restrictions there are on us sponsoring an employee through an employee visa. Then if the attorney recommends that each specific sponsorship form be reviewed by counsel, that's kind of
that might be
too. But I think that the second question, which I feel like is a totally separate question that essentially isn't before us right now, is if we understand that, and then this particular employee says, I need you to pay some extra amount or do some extra work for me for my application, that seems like a very different question to me than do we as a municipality need advice on what it means for us to provide sponsorship for someone's visa, which seems like a valid human resources thing for us to know.
The other issue too is the next sentence under A7 says occasional use of materials. Occasional use of municipal resources, employee participation. ... is outside the jurisdiction of the ethics board. Is an expenditure of municipal funds not an occasional use?
I don't think it is.
Okay, so that would be
I
a
don't
permanent use of that small amount
Yeah,
of funds,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure
I think
that
they're
was
talking
clear.
about, uniforms, firefighter uniforms,
Okay.
at the
All right.
fur ronde and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But I like this, the more global perspective.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to go to the attorney with anything specific about this person, like how old she is and what she does, really. To some degree, we're just going to say, we've been approached by an employee to be a sponsor. What does that mean? What do we have to do? Maybe just to get more information about what are our liabilities? Where are our areas of risk?
Mhm. And this administration, by the way, wants to be very inclusive and would love this type of
Oh,
outreach.
yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
the administration here would favor all of this.
Right.
Well, we live in a community with a lot of people who are
Mhm.
from other parts of the world, and it's time we haven't yet had this.
So essentially what we're looking for is a legal advice for the city.
Right.
It's not to help her. I like that perspective.
Yeah, but that shouldn't come from us, that should come from the.
Oh, no, but I as
No,
municipal
no.
attorney,
Yeah.
have asked, he and I decided together, let's bring this to the ethics board. Because I was more caught up on we're helping one individual and we're using municipal resources,
Right.
which is
That's what you're
inappropriate.
doing
Well,
on this. This is not, it covers one person, one item. Now, if you're looking to get this information for down the road for a different, that should be the municipal attorneys, not the ethics board.
let me ask you, Dee, do you think there's another section of the code that would apply other than this one? Or is this the section that we should be reviewing relative to this?
I didn't look whether it's just a diversion of public
That's it.
resources, and
And that is the-
and there's there's state constitutional law about public purpose of funds too, but we're not a constitutional group, so
Right.
so,
So really-
it's really that general idea. And by the way, one of the reasons I thought it was good for a referral, if you remember back one of our opinions where we said it was okay for the Olive Garden to invite all
Right.
the firefighters,
Mhm.
both I and the clerk at the time said, we're
I
not
know.
so sure it's okay to invite.
We said it was
And you
okay.
go, it's so easy, what are you
Yeah.
even concerned about? So
Yeah.
this is sort of a reasonable person standard that a bunch of people get together and say, no, we think this is probably good. And that's enough for, Ted, the municipal attorney's office does oversee the retention of outside counsel. So it has to come through us. And so here I brought up a roadblock. So well, I don't know if this is public purpose or not. So
Well, how would it... Oh, go ahead. Yes.
I think just looking at 7, the
Right.
language, this seems to be, when you characterize this exactly the way Becky did, it is related to municipal business.
It is.
Right.
It's related to municipal business. It divert or permit the diversion of municipal personnel time, services, vehicles, equipment, materials, or other property. Does this money fall under the category of other property? I'm just trying to figure out where it seems like a little odd fit, but I want to make sure that if that's what we're saying, that's what we're
It
saying.
could be resources, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Resources.
Yeah, the spirit of that is you just don't
Right.
want to be devoting resources, whether it's time or money,
Okay.
to
Right.
things that aren't related to municipal business, but as you characterize it, Becky,
Yeah, I
it's
agree
very
with your point. I
municipal.
feel
Right.
like it is municipal business related. I mean, I think there's a division. Maybe this is a process question, would we issue an actual written response? to this?
Yes.
I would say in our response we could say, to the extent this is an inquiry about the process of sponsoring an employee
Right.
as, for a work visa based on, this one case we have before us, this is municipal business. We're an employer, we need to know what it means to sponsor an employee. To the extent it goes to this woman's individual application and what she needs to do, that's not municipal business,
Right.
that's not covered by the question, that's her responsibility. And then we can go from there. I mean, if we don't have the in-house advice to know what it means to sponsor an employee, we need to get it.
Right.
And apparently, by the way, ER was involved in this before I got involved, and I can double check. I'll just as a procedure double check with them, but I'm sure they weren't looking at a public use of resource issue. So,
Okay. Yeah.
if the board says, "Hey, we don't have a problem with it," then it would go through its normal courses,
Right.
which is legal and ER and
Right.
the municipal manager. Then
Right.
it gets to go dot all those I's.
Right. Right.
That's not our concern.
So the question really is whether it's related to municipal business, and that's the ultimate issue. And then it follows, and then it kind of goes back on track. It goes back through your office, and then and wherever it goes from there. The decision whether to expend the money goes on. We're simply saying whether it
Relates
violates
to-
this provision of the
Right,
code.
right.
That really is, we're not deciding whether to spend the money or not. We're simply deciding whether it's okay to make that determination.
And
Okay.
can I tell you, by the way
Yeah.
you're doing that too is by looking at related to municipal business
Mhm.
or purpose or something. When I first heard that she could be replaced by a local American citizen, to me that ended the public analysis, and it really doesn't. What you're doing is a finer shade that whether or not she meets that immigration standard, it's to our benefit as an employer, so that is municipal purpose. So I
Right.
sort of ended the analysis when I heard, wait a minute, she can be replaced by a local person. Why are we spending more money on
Right.
this issue? But I think this
I mean, I think it's the same. I think an analogy is like if we had one particular employee who had like a health issue and had a question on whether or not they could use Gumla leave
Right.
for something specific to their specific complicated personal health issue, that's a municipal business issue. If we don't have an in-house
And we would
human
get outside
resources
counsel if we
Right.
needed to.
who can address that, we would need to go to outside counsel. And it would be
Yeah.
about this person and their job, but it's municipal business because they're our employee and it's our job as an employer to address those issues. And so I guess I see that as analogous.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that person's a
Well, in the same way too, a private employer would want to do the same
Oh,
thing
yeah.
to protect its interests.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I
Ted.
was just sitting up at employee relations business up there, and they got plastered all over the wall up there. That illegal, stuff you can't do.
Right.
The city can't do, and a lot of it has to do with immigration and illegal immigrants and legal immigrants and work visas and all that. So, if the city attorney can't help it, he should go up to personnel, because they got it all laid out, what she can do, what she can't do, and all this, and the city can do.
Well,
The city says that the city can't fire them.
If I may respond to that, I think that the way I'm kind of turned around on this now is that we're not looking at it from her perspective anymore. We're looking at it from the perspective of the city.
Yeah.
Not what she can or can't do or whatever. It's what the city could potentially be liable for in the event it wants to take this certain direction. We are interested in, and this is why I will foreshadow why I think that this is related to municipal business, is because in the same way an employer wants to know before they hire somebody or fire somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You want to know what the potential liability is and what your responsibility is to this employee. She's already an employee. So the question is, at this stage, what is in the best interest of the city? To me, is a city issue, not a her issue. And if she wants to do whatever she can or she can't do, that's fine.
Yeah, whether or not she qualifies
Right,
for,
I mean-
this is like an H-1B, right? That would
Right.
be all her, but whether what we do.
That enforces my part that says, it should come from either personnel or municipal attorneys, and I'm sure you've had this probably before. Not immigration, but I mean,
Yeah.
about whether you keep a person or whether you fire a person, this sort of thing. So, and whatever we decide here, we're not going to eliminate any liability. Absolutely none.
No, because I don't think that's our role in this
Right.
decision.
Right.
In this decision, we're being asked a very specific decision that I think we can make. We can make a decision whether it's related to municipal business or not. And I think that's the ultimate question.
And then who's going to spend the money?
Oh, the
Well, but-
department does. No, the department.
The department does, but then again, once either it's related or it's not, then it goes on through the regular channels.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I could not support it to going to a private individual, not a department.
But
It's going to the department. I mean, that's the thing is we're
Yeah.
gonna give the okay to TE's department to go back and spend
Mhm.
money on this to get advice for the department which they don't have. They
Right.
don't have in-house
Yeah,
immigration
that-
counsel.
legal,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with this.
No, it's broad advice, it's not specific
Right.
to this
Right,
particular.
okay,
Yeah.
I can, if the municipal attorney's office said we want to spend $750, I've never seen that where they have to get permission from the
well, I don't know that
for
they
an
have
outside
to, but
opinion, for an outside opinion.
right.
Now, I mean,
Well, it just happens because I happen to be the same person, so
Yeah,
to me,
no,
it is
yeah.
an important issue, whether,
Yeah,
how
Miss-
we spend our public funds.
now,
There's no question, but I like Becky's analysis is that if we have a really difficult FEMLA or FLSA issue, we do have the ability to seek outside counsel, a
Right.
specialist in that area.
right,
And I think that is similar, and even though that's very one-person, fact-specific,
Mm-hmm.
that it's in our best interest as a city to do things correctly.
And I would say too, to add to that, is that all of these issues aren't always brought before the ethics, but this one happened to have been brought to us, and I feel comfortable making a decision on it. I don't think it's required necessarily, but it was
Well,
brought to us for a decision, and I feel
it's-
comfortable making a decision.
It's unusual because they got
Right.
me two roles, so poor them, they couldn't just get their little short form contract.
Right.
They're like, what?
Okay.
Go to the ethics board.
Do we have any more? I mean, I feel like I understand your point. I get your point. Does anybody else have anything to add to where we're at? Because I think we're at the point where we can make a decision and then move on. Does anybody have any further comment? I do not intend to cut anybody off. I just want to make sure that if we've got it all out there, we can take a vote now.
well, I mean, I can support it if it's coming from the municipal attorney's office, but not from Steve. what's his
Steve
name?
Morris.
Morris. I mean, and it shouldn't, and then whatever we write up shouldn't have anything to do with him or this person. It's from the municipal attorney has got a problem. This is the municipal attorney's problem, right here. Okay, they want to spend $750, the municipal attorney does, to hire some outside help. I can approve that, but not if it's going to be directed at this.
I think the reason that that he raises, the reason the municipal attorney's office is raises is because their client is asking about this. The client needs
Yeah, our
advice.
client is the
The
department.
department,
Mhm.
the
Right.
department needs advice. The municipal
Yeah.
attorney's office said, hey, there might be an ethics component to this, let's just explore it. But it did come through Mr.
Yeah.
Morris.
But I understand that technically what we would be okaying is the municipal attorney's office to go, because the municipal attorney's office actually obtains the outside counsel,
Yeah,
right?
we-
So, retains them, so it would be, so we're saying, okay, municipal attorney's office, go retain outside counsel on a question that was raised from these facts, but which pertains generally to the municipality, and what our role would be in sponsoring someone's work, be able what liabilities, responsibilities, et cetera, are inherent in that kind of process for future reference. And
And even further, more specifically to the point too, is we're not saying go do it. We're simply saying
you are
it doesn't.
okay to do it.
You're
Yeah.
okay. It doesn't.
Should you
If exactly, should you make that choice, it would not violate this section of the code.
Yeah, correct.
That's a very narrow, specific issue. It seems to me, and so we're not saying go spend money. We're simply saying ethically it's your choice, but it's okay if you want to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that the way I look at it is kind of a decision that's been temporarily taken off track so that we can take a quick look at it so they can go back on track and then continue through the normal process. Am I looking at it? Okay. All right.
But I guess I want to point
Yeah.
out another thing, though. This isn't a consensus board, so
Yeah.
if people, vote three,
Yeah.
whatever it is, and that Ted, I don't know whether we have a dissent or something.
Right.
I don't want it just to be under the authority of the municipal attorney's office. I think there is an ethics issue here,
Yeah.
and you've decided that this particular set of facts, or if you've given the okay that it's not an ethical
Yeah.
violation to retain outside counsel, to seek advice on behalf of the city in terms of their responsibility. That's okay.
Right.
But if you read 7, we should be in, we're the very municipal personnel and this sort of thing for something that's not municipal business.
Right. The question is whether do you think it's unrelated to municipal
Right.
business? Okay.
See,
Well,
so I think there is a
that's right.
fundamental difference
No,
here.
that's right.
And it's not a consensus, and so
no, that's fine.
I
So I'm
guess
ready
I
to take a
suggest
vote.
vote, and then
Yeah. All right. So,
Can I make a motion?
yes, of course.
That we have no objection, and the ethics board has no objections to the municipal attorney's office expending funds to seek information, seek advice, reference informations that they don't have. Something to that effect. You know what I'm trying to say?
I think so.
Okay.
Can I say, but the clarification is, it's really
Yeah.
not us
Right.
paying for it. It's the Department of Health is paying for it. We're just the overseer of outside counsel contracts. So it's not really, I mean, part of the opinion would be that the
Well, I-
Department of Law reference, they don't have this
Well, I
expertise.
strongly oppose Health and Human Services spending $700.
Okay, that's who's spending it. That's
Yeah.
who's spending it, not us.
Yeah.
I don't.
See, that's why I say, I think there is a difference of opinion here,
Yeah.
and that we're not going to be able to
Right.
Would that, whatever advice we got though would be sort of advice we would have, to say there was work product produced, if we get a memo from the attorney or something about what's needed from me, that would be something that, and the municipal attorney's office could reference for any
Mhm.
future.
Have on
decisions,
file.
right? It's just a matter of how it's billed, right? Generally.
Mhm.
and give to the Department of to ER. And,
Does the municipality seek outside counsel advice on special projects from time
Yes,
to
we
time?
do.
Oh.
You know what I'm trying to say.
I think so. So, all right. So, what is the very specific question before us is what? Oh, I just want to make sure that it's written very carefully because we've been discussing fine points.
And maybe after we put out the elements, it's whether
Yeah. Wait, I gotta write this down.
the
I want to make sure this is
the retention of outside counsel, right? I mean,
whether
the retention of outside counsel by DHHS, or the Health Department.
Well,
No, but I mean this is the question, and I think it's different. It's very different than your question.
whether. Let me write this down. Then we
Okay,
can
whether
talk
the
about
retention of outside counsel by DHHS
it. Mm-hmm.
to, what would it be, to seek information or to seek
expert opinion?
advice, to seek
Yeah, or
advice.
some general advice on the
Expert.
responsibilities and liabilities of an employer providing sponsorship to an employee's
I can't write
visa.
that fast. I'm sorry. That sounded really
Well,
good.
you know,
but-
I feel like Becky's going to end up with this opinion, so she should be writing
Okay.
this.
Okay,
Because she's
Like,
that
uh-oh.
person that, I mean, you practically did an opinion a few minutes ago.
I want to make sure the question on the table is accurate
Yeah.
because this is. I want to make sure it's worded
well,
right.
when you stated the Health and Human Services requesting outside donor, okay, you know, if they're spending money and they're going to go get information from an outside attorney, it's not going to help the city attorney's office at all.
Well, I think there's a difference of opinion
Yeah.
on that, is the thing.
So whether the retention of outside counsel by DHSS or DHHS to seek
General advice.
General advice. Okay, general advice
general advice
Responsibilities and liabilities.
on the
On-
responsibilities
Sponsoring.
Of the municipality when sponsoring.
of the
When
municipality.
sponsoring work visa, an employee work visa.
An employee work visa.
And it's either something about would be in violation or represents a diversion of represents a diversion or
Well-
constitutes a diversion of municipal resources under the code section.
But unrelated, a diversion of resources for
Oh.
a purpose
Right.
unrelated to municipal business. Because
That's right.
where we can
Yeah.
right and say,
Mhm.
right, there's, whether or not it's
municipal
So no wonder Ted, it was hard to say.
right municipal funds
It would be related to municipal business
would
If
constitute
it-
diversion of municipal
for you.
funds.
for the city attorney, not for Health and Human Services.
How does billing work in general with the meeting? Is this so? It's
Yeah.
saying parallel FEMLA issue. It's a Department of Health and Human Services employee who has a FEMLA question. Does DHS then pay the bill if you hire outside employment counsel?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
so
it still comes.
It's always, the department
But
always
there's-
pays for
the
the
department
legal
that
advice.
instigates the question.
Right.
So if somebody slips and falls on a bus and you hire outside tort counsel for
Right.
some reason,
Right.
it's the Department of
Well,
Transportation that pays for the.
that's an unusual one because torts go through the risk department.
Okay, so-
we have to stay away from
Sorry.
that. Risk goes differently.
But any kind of case, if it's
yeah.
a civil case
Well,
over a
it's like
contract.
APD is not happy that when we don't have experts in certain acts that they have to pay for huge amounts of money
Yeah.
to outside
Well, that's-
counsel because so
But that
yes.
would be between APD and
But no, the
Municipal
departments
attorneys.
pay their
The
outside
department,
counsel
yeah,
legal
It
fees.
wouldn't have to come to us.
I mean, we still oversee the contract, we still let it
Yeah.
out one way or the other, we
Yeah.
oversee it, we get copies of everything, that type of thing, but it's always the department. Legal is not generally paying for outside counsel.
But the legal advice, like, comes back to you guys?
Yes.
Like, it belongs to
No.
PD, and they're like, too bad, you were my counsel on this.
Which creates
That
all
was
sorts
for
of
you.
interesting attorney-client, who's the holder of the attorney-client privilege?
Why don't we make this real simple?
Not. Okay.
To make it real
I have
simple.
some.
The question is whether this be an appropriate use of municipal time and funds. That's the question. I mean, it's written right here, highlight. And all we have to do is answer that question.
But Ted, the standard isn't appropriate use.
Yeah.
It's a diversion of municipal resources unrelated
Okay,
to.
it says right in here.
I know, but.
The
that's
question
what-
is whether this would be an appropriate use of municipal time and funds. Yes or no?
Okay, but I don't think that's an ethical question. That's him just phrasing it in a non-code fashion.
Let me throw this out here as an idea, and tell me what you think. So the vote is going to be on yes or no. That retention of outside counsel by DHHS to seek general advice on responsibilities and liabilities of the municipality when sponsoring an employee work visa does not constitute diversion of municipal funds for purposes unrelated to municipality business in violation of AMC 115.0207. So what? So
So
I'm
yes
tr-
vote is not a
That's-
violation.
yeah, I know.
No vote is a violation.
and if you can think of a better way to make that clear, but I was trying to use the language in the statute and also say a yes vote means this. A yes vote is an affirmative because I hate to do a reverse. Does that make sense?
Mhm,
I know it's a
mhm.
little
Yeah,
convoluted.
no, that makes sense.
So the concept is if you vote yes, what you're saying is that the retention of outside counsel is not a diversion of funds for a purpose unrelated in violation of the statute.
Right.
I know it's a
Yes
negative.
is- Yes is a permission to go ahead with this under the
And,
ethics code.
and under the
no
ethics
is-
code,
Yeah.
specifically under the code, and I think that's the issue that's here is the one that we're deciding. Not whether to expend the money necessarily, but whether it's okay under the code to then make the decision to do it, if that's what they want to do.
So you're saying yes to that question you're asking?
No, we're
Yes.
asking,
Well, that's the vote.
Yeah, well. and-
yes, it's okay, no, it's
Yes
not.
means
Stated
it's-
that,
You're not
stated
saying-
that question, then,
It's okay.
Yeah.
If you vote against this, then you're saying it's not okay to do this. That it's contrary to the language in the code to divert the funds to hire outside counsel.
By saying you're not saying yes to spending the money. You're just saying
That's
yes
right.
to, it's not a violation of the code.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm.
So-
I think that's the very specific issue.
That's a big deal.
I agree with
Yeah.
that.
So this would be an appropriate use of municipal time and funds.
That's not the
No.
question.
That's not, when you say yes, you're simply saying that there's no violation of the ethics code.
That's right.
And that
We don't have the
the
authority to
municipality
do
can
that.
decide if they want to.
We're
do
not
it.
making the decision whether to expend funds, nor are we being asked to. We're
Yeah.
simply being asked to determine whether expenditure of such funds would violate the code.
Right.
Because that's all we do here,
Yeah.
is try to figure out whether
Yeah.
it violates
Well,
the
if
code.
we want to stick to that.
Okay, ready for a vote?
No,
All right, so,
Lisa has.
yeah,
Okay.
so I guess we're not
You wanna
making a motion
state the
yet.
motion?
Is it a motion to vote? What is it? What am I doing?
Well, we're only doing this because we need to be clear.
Yeah, but
So-
basically we're going to make a vote on this statement.
Mhm.
All right? Okay, so do I need to repeat this out? No?
I think for the
Let me-
record.
Let me repeat it just to be.
Yeah, and then I'll,
I thought you were going to make me read it. Of all people, I thought you were going to make me read it.
then I'll
Okay.
poll the members.
Okay, so the question on the table is,
Just keep stirring.
no, the question on the table is that a yes vote in favor of that retention of outside counsel by Department of Health and Human Services to seek general advice on the responsibilities and liabilities of the municipality when sponsoring an employee work visa does not constitute a diversion of municipal funds for a purpose unrelated to the municipality business in violation of AMC Anchorage Municipal Code 1.15.02A7. That's the question on the table. So,
Can
can we take a vote? What?
Can I add something to that?
I would
Right where you said,
I
right
would
where you said Health and Human Services. Read that short part there, where you said Health and Human Services. With the assistance of the municipal attorney's office.
no. I don't want to add that language.
Right. Not, so you're saying Health and Human Services is going to hire that attorney.
That's a process outside of our question before us. That's what I feel.
Well, and I agree with your position, but you could do, instead of with the assistance, it could be through the municipal attorney's office, and maybe that would meet Ted's concern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It may not add anything in terms of your analysis. What do you think of that? Retained by them through the municipal attorney's office.
I have no problem with that. I think
That would
it
assure
limits our
us-
decision if they
That would
have to
assure
go
us
through you to
that
be
the
in the
information,
Right.
scope of
I
our
know.
vision,
information
but-
they get from this outside attorney ends up in the municipal attorney's office.
Yeah, that's true. So we get the benefit because it's not.
So
just
they
a-
get the benefit of it.
Okay. I didn't want to pigeonhole the process, but if that's okay with you, all right, because that's ultimately what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Practically speaking, does that hobble them in any way?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's the question I have. Okay, so that
Call for the question.
right. So the question is that retention of outside counsel by Department of Health and Human Services. I'm going to slow down. That retention of outside counsel by the Department of Health and Human Services through the municipal attorney's office
Mhm.
to seek general advice on the responsibilities and liabilities of the municipality when sponsoring an employee work visa does not constitute diversion of municipal funds for a purpose unrelated to municipal business in violation of Anchorage Municipal Code 1.15.020A7. So all in favor?
You need to pull
Should we,
up.
let's do a poll vote.
Yeah.
How do you vote, David Nesbitt?
In favor? Yes.
Terrence Kelly is absent. Becky Wendt?
Yes.
Ted Carlson?
Yes.
Kathleen King?
Yes.
All right. There we have it. So the motion passes. And do we draft something now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Becky. You were so eloquent.
Can I take your piece of paper?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I don't mean to throw this on you. Do you have time?
Sure. What's the
Okay.
timing and where do I have like a form that I can take?
Right. I was just going to say, can Lisa or Dee, can you maybe give her a form? Some of our previous
Well, what we need to give
opinions
you,
or
have you gotten yet a book of our past opinions?
that'll give you a sample. of
Because
it.
there's
No,
sort
I
of
don't
a
believe
template.
Is there a book? You've talked about this.
Yeah,
book.
I have the book. That's what I.
You
pulled
haven't
out.
seen it, have
I
you?
haven't seen the
Yeah.
book.
Let's get a
You
few
should
more
probably get a
made. Do
couple
you have
copies
one?
of the book.
Of all our past opinions.
No.
They're also available online.
Mhm.
It's
Okay.
easier in the book, and you can look at them real quickly. And so I'll try to marshal that resource. But I can also show you, Becky, where you find the opinions online.
I know where they are on the municipal website. If that's
Yeah,
the best
that's
way to
it,
look,
yeah.
just so I know
Yeah.
what to do. And then timing wise, is this something that needs to be done before the next meeting?
Before the next meeting.
Before the next meeting.
Okay.
And this would be my suggestion too, is that when we do a notice of potential violation, it tends to be a more specific outline form that we use. For an advisory opinion, this is an advisory opinion, right? So
Mhm.
for an advisory opinion, it's a little bit more open and kind of like what Lisa has done. I tend to fall back on the IRAC that was pounded into me through law school. So because I think that works. But but it doesn't need to be quite as formulaic as some of our notice of potential violations need to be.
Okay.
And I am always in favor of brevity. And especially on the issue that really
Narrow,
is very,
yeah.
very narrow. I don't think that we need to
This
spend...
could be a page or two. Easily.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
And so that's just an idea.
May I take this with me? I'd rather
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Anything you need from
Right.
that.
Okay.
And then what we'll do is we'll review your draft. We tend to do it in a group, not spreading emails back and forth.
And Becky, the theory there is it could be serial emailing can be violation of the
Yeah,
public meeting
open
things.
meetings.
But I don't think it's harmful. Oftentimes all it go back and forth with Lisa or
Yeah.
some other person to get
Right.
that second set of eyes. And I think that's fine. So
Yeah.
you send it to David, or
Yeah.
and the two of you go back and forth.
If you want, send it to me.
Okay.
And I'll be happy to.
Sure.
to do
But we
that.
asked not to do the whole group and
Right.
everybody's emailing back and forth.
Right.
Okay,
And then what we'll do is we'll bring a draft to the next meeting. Hopefully we can get something approved.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, great.
All right. Thank you. Good. Thank you for doing that. Okay. What's next on our agenda? Consent?
Consent.
Right. I have not looked at these. Sometimes it helps to be able to just skim through them individually.
There's only two.
Oh, there's only two.
Except
Okay.
gift exceptions.
All right.
It looks like $200 is the amount to get through a teacher.
Oh, these are the ones. Right.
It's from
Okay.
the same parent to two different teachers.
Oh,
Okay.
really? Oh,
In
that's
cash.
nice. Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Right.
But the second one sounds better towards new classroom needs.
Sounds better, but it comes down to.
But it still comes from one
Supplies,
person.
yeah.
Relation to the teacher of son. What did we say? This was two different teachers from the same parent.
Yes.
It looks like
Okay.
main employees.
I don't think. To me, I don't. I would recommend sending our letter
Mhm.
to
Well,
them.
you know,
Yes.
on both of these situations, it specifically says in the code that we wrote that for the one they said that it was going for classroom supplies, they will be like coming from one.
That's right.
And the code specifically says it's got to come from an organization
That's right.
and not through her,
That's right.
through the teacher.
Right.
So it's got to come from PTA or
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So write a letter
Yes.
to that.
Both.
Yep.
Yes.
And
Yes.
same thing with the other one,
Yes.
because they bump $200. So
Yes.
I mean, it's not a lot.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
That's what I propose. Sending letters to both.
So I'm going to send a letter to both saying they have
Yeah.
to return.
They have to return the money.
And come through and state this section that says has to come through an organization.
Now, do they return $150?
We've been saying return it all.
Okay.
Yeah, you can say no
All
to
right.
that. But
Okay. Let's see. Then we go to gifts disclosure. No. Skip. Conflict of interest. Skip. I don't have anything in my book. Am I
Nope.
am I skipping? Okay.
We're going all the way down to
interest.
present economic interests.
All right. Present economic interests. And we have. Let's see.
We have disclosure. The first one I have is the Board of Ethics disclosures. I'm just going to pass these around. If you could leave your disclosure
Oh,
for me
this is-
today. And could we make a decision that Becky's is being approved today? Does she have to fill it out again? Or
No.
can
No.
this be her annual? Okay.
No, I
So
say-
just Ted and Kathy.
I was just going to
Kathleen.
grab them both.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you do
No,
this
I
one at a
don't.
time?
Only the two, and then
Okay.
David. So
Yeah.
if you three could do yours and hand them in, we'll have them for next time.
Did we? I know you put this in writing here. Did we talk about this already?
Which one?
About Becky's employment with GCI? I don't
we
see
may
that.
have casually, but we didn't approve it last time.
Okay. All right.
So the new ones are in front, and then of course when we get back to Mackey, not Mackey, but Seward, then we're going
Back to
into
my stuff,
another
yeah.
area.
I'm sorry, Lisa. Did you say that there was a yellow sheet in there?
No,
separating-
there's not a yellow sheet, but
Okay.
as you're looking through them, when you get to Seward, that's a repeat, and you'll see at the top exception.
I have a financial.
I was supposed to report back on those from Seward on, I think.
Dee will report back once you get there.
Okay. Any business done with Morris Design Build would have a financial effect on my personal life. I plan to avoid municipal contracts during my term as commissioner.
I don't think the UDC has anything to do with that. I've never seen them. They basically do like planning and zoning style review of municipal
Is that true?
projects,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
very
know.
limited, actually.
Are they? So, okay. All right.
They're a little teeny jurisdictional group.
Oh,
these
right.
buildings,
What-
right? And
I'm
like,
sorry, did you say you were
are-
gonna-
Yeah, once we get here, we'll need to
Right?
stop.
Okay.
And then Dee will have some information for us.
Okay, so I am. We are at the last two, and Dee has additional information for
Okay,
us
so
on
which
these
one
last
is
two.
the first one
Are
of
we
the
all
last two?
there? So the last two. When I say the last two,
Okay.
that would be. Is that Dwayne Seward?
Dwayne Seward
And then there's Jamie Patterson Sims. These are ones that came up last time, right? And that Dee was going to
And we pulled
investigate.
Yeah, and
And
this
then-
is, go ahead.
No, and then the first one is Dwayne Seward because occasionally present long plat cases. If I remember, we talked about the definition of a long plat case. Apparently, that's a
Right.
term of art that is significant for plat case.
Okay. And I
Um,
did talk to the staffer, which is
yeah.
this David Whitfield.
Yeah.
And he says and he was going to be available for 10 minutes at the beginning of our meeting.
Yeah.
He might still be available, but basically, the long and the short of it was that they almost always try to have surveyors on this board. The surveys are at issue. It's not just some corollary, secondary thing. Are often at issue, and the rule is basically if it's your survey, you don't participate, and it's black
Okay.
and white. They don't discuss
And that's
it.
the way it's been handled.
Yeah, handled,
Okay.
and he has no problem with it. And, he's a plating officer.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. How about Miss Patterson Sims?
This
Or
is the one
Mr.
that, it's a woman actually, Jamie.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, she,
Oh, that's
by
right.
code, they have to have someone there who
Oh.
is a lessee on Merrill Field.
Oh.
And I have the code section if you're interested.
That's okay.
But,
Question.
yeah, so that,
Okay, so that's good.
she is that code required person.
Okay. Good. Notice of intent to respond to public solicitations. Is there anything in here?
Well, there's
Lisa?
an E part of that, and that was you
Did I
were
skip
going
something?
to get with Felix
okay.
and Ona. Is that? Are we going to delay that a little bit?
Well,
or-
yeah, because
okay.
Ona is the number one person for the 8th floor who deals with the disclosures from the administrative boards and commissions. She is out of town this week.
Okay.
So if I've advised them that in the next meeting, so I need to make sure I have the next meeting, that
Okay,
they
so
should
we'll
come.
put it on next meeting.
In response to me making calls, they've in fact sent us some more. And Teresa's going to send us her log.
Oh, you did talk to
She will
Teresa?
also send them back out again.
Okay.
And I said, let's explain the whole process to the board. Remember, we went around with the administration is currently in the process of trying to change how the board of supervisors for the different service areas are, that they'll be appointed versus elected, and makes some difference. But I said, no, I think having them in once a year makes it move. So I will have both of them, probably Ona and Teresa, come to the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So we'll move E to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 5, intent to respond to public solicitations. Is this one?
This one.
Can you tell us anything about this, Dee? Do you know anything about this, or Lisa? Let's see.
You know, it's the same thing. It's
Oh,
the
we
Anchor
dealt-
School
yeah.
District, and I think that at some point, if we're not busy, we might need to look into trying to get the Anchor School District to develop their own form, because they're using a form for this public solicitation that from purchasing that doesn't have anything to do. You know, doesn't have the same nature
So this.
of what they're doing over there.
So it sounds like what's happening is you have Anchorage School District employees who do side businesses like tutoring or coaching or teaching on the side, and we have always in the past said that's okay,
Right.
right? I mean, I don't think we've ever not said it's
And then
okay.
we've also told them this is not the appropriate form for you. You shouldn't even be filling this out. But
Right.
ASD actually has this form written into their policy.
Right,
So they really need to have their own form.
right. But
And
they
it
just don't
doesn't
wanna
even
change
need to
that.
come over here. It needs to
Right.
stay within house.
Okay.
So these guys are coming over paying their $15, and it's like, for what? You
Right.
don't need to be, you know?
Okay.
So
So,
it's just another case where I took the $15 and we publish it, and
sure. So,
But the ethics code requires some notice of intent to respond to public, right? That's in the ethics code.
Right.
And you're just saying this form doesn't meet that notice, that requirement?
This was developed for purchasing's purpose, and they have a more specific purpose. If they just had their own form, it would be helpful.
Well, maybe Lisa, you and I can meet about this, because and I deal with purchasing all the time, so I'm not quite sure where the rub is. So
Okay.
why don't you and I try, because maybe if you can explain, I'm not getting it. And I'm pretty thrilled that purchasing is requiring the form at all. That's a victory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because remember that was our problem in that one
Yeah,
case?
that's right.
Where they were like, well, we don't look at these.
Right. Yeah.
Oh. Okay,
any-
so let me try to meet with you and
Okay.
try to figure out what we can do to improve the process.
Okay.
Okay. Because we do see that fairly regularly.
We see that more than we see it actually being used for public solicitation for purchasing.
Mhm.
You know, every now and then when
Right.
they have those auction on those houses and stuff, we get a big influx because a lot of municipal employees are bidding. But other than that,
Right.
we just keep getting them from ASD people that this isn't really the right form for them. It's not a solicitation put out by the purchasing
Okay, let's
department.
figure it out. So.
Okay. I move to accept the consent agenda. I think is the way to say it.
Approve it.
I move to approve the consent agenda. Any objection to that? We've started flying through these things
Yeah.
because we used to go individually for each one and it would take forever. So, any objection to approving the consent agenda? Hearing no objection, it passes.
No, but whenever we go through that, we'll give everybody an option code taken off.
Of course. No, and that's my intent right now. When I ask for no objections, I want to make sure that that's an
Yeah.
opportunity for anybody to bring something up. I'm doing it quickly because, absolutely, yeah. If you think, for example, that one letter should be sent to this person and we just fly by it, then that's your opportunity to say, what about this one? That's what I'm trying to do. We used to, just by way of background, we used to have stacks of these forms. We changed the code specifically to, and we used to, remember, hours just leaving.
Couldn't get
through
past the consent.
We could never get past the consent agenda every meeting. So this is what we're trying to. We're trying to streamline it, and in addition, we also helped rewrite the code to avoid a lot of these things. That gifts area, we helped rewrite, and so we were able to very effectively address that issue.
Yeah, to have safe harbors didn't need disclosure.
Right.
Before all of those needed disclosure.
All of them. So we'd get stacks every semester from schools, and then we realized too, only like 20% of the schools were even reporting. It's not funny, but it was. Okay, so consent agenda was approved. So let's go on to new business. Mr. Carlson, it's your turn. Lisa, can we help swear Mr. Carlson in?
And then in this, if you could fill that out for me, okay. But Ted, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to swear you in. And I'll let you read off there if you need to. Okay?
Okay, I, Ted Carlson, solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, Constitution of the State of Alaska, and the Charter of the Municipality of Anchorage, and faithfully perform the duties of the Board of Ethics to the best of my ability.
Very much. If you would sign there, Ted, then I'll go and certify it.
Do we have to move to approve him?
Somebody already did.
All right. The next Assembly Ethics and Elections Committee meeting, they have been canceling theirs recently.
But
the
they're
last
not
2
now.
months. Oh,
So, yes, they actually rescheduled
Okay.
to have the meeting, and it's going to be
Okay.
on not the 4th.
Is there something specifically they want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
they have something that they need to meet about.
Okay.
But it's an opportunity, again, for...
All right. Let's see. January.
David, your turn.
Careful, Missy.
Yeah.
January the
Opportunity.
20th, Wednesday.
I'm sorry. Let me check the calendar. January 20th. Hey, at 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock.
Yeah. We'll just. They usually are really good about taking me first and get me out in 5 minutes, and then I'll stop by a few minutes early
Okay.
and reconnoiter with you.
Okay, because you're going to talk about that
That's-
educational piece
Yeah.
about disclosures.
About disclosures.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So you'll.
And, of course,
Yeah.
Terry won't be with you because Wednesday he'll be teaching class, so it will
Right.
be just you.
It'll just be me. So I'll rely on you just to kind of get me a quick. Okay. Let's see.
You're the only one that can sort of that.
I'm the only one that goes to that. I try to make a habit of doing that.
And I will remind you. I'll send you a reminder.
Yeah, please do. Please do. I rely on you heavily for those types of things. Okay. Let's see. We've dealt with 6C, right?
Mm-hmm.
We moved that up, dealt with it. And then we've dealt with 7B.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say on 7C that Dee and I, we have work to do that we have not done. And I haven't been bugging you.
I wanted
Go
to
ahead.
make a suggestion on that,
Yes.
because I never make the time either. I think for myself, it would
Mhm.
be easier if I worked with Lisa, who's
Yes.
half a floor away from me,
Yes.
and the two of us could meet
Great.
for an hour here and an hour there.
Awesome.
And only fair to a private attorney
Perfect.
anyway.
I appreciate
And I
that.
asked Lisa if she would be willing to do that, because
And-
I've done nothing either.
Yeah.
And,
And maybe just get me a draft.
Oh no, and
And
then I
then
was
we
going to
can-
say, and the second part
yeah.
of that is let us do the first, and then we'll give it to you for the second set of
That'd
eyes.
be awesome.
And
can
then-
you do that, Lisa?
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect, yes. Okay, you're going to be reading. I can't multitask. I'm hearing and reading. And
You and I
Yes,
would
you
do
and I
the
will work
rewrite
together.
instead, because that will force me. Lisa grabs me all the time for things.
That'd be very helpful.
I think it would be helpful for both of
And
us.
thank you very much to Kathleen too, because I know you've done a
Uh-huh.
lot
Yes,
of this
yes,
up to
yeah,
date.
some of it.
So,
It
what's that?
helps.
Some of it. I mean, I haven't.
Yeah. No. I mean, part of it is just keep the ball rolling.
Oh,
I
I
really
know.
appreciate that.
But I think just because we're in proximity
Yes,
to one another,
that's
the
fantastic.
chances of me and you making time to meet is.
Okay.
Um,
That would be great.
Okay.
So, and then
So,
I skipped over 7A.
Okay,
So,
A.
yeah, what do you
I'm
got for
sorry,
us?
I keep interrupting you, but
Nope.
the A in the book, I forgot I had additional notes. A in the book primarily represents accepting all of Kathleen's changes and a few other ones.
Mhm.
But in fact, then I found my notes and realized we had some substantive issues. So let me and I'm sorry I didn't redline these, but I will tell you what they are.
Mhm. Oh, this
Is
is
that
to
enough?
okay.
Harris.
Yeah, this is to
Okay.
Mr. Harris. And is this public? This is not confidential.
This is
anymore, right?
public, yeah.
Okay.
And the parts that I changed is the last opinion with all of Kathleen's changes. Remember, she didn't want, didn't think it was wise. We were appreciating and doing all
Yeah, a little
sorts of sort of
grand.
emotional
Yes,
stuff.
yeah.
Where I had to go back in and change was, let's see, okay, under purchasing. If you look at page 2,
Uh-huh.
the last of the major page 2 under purchasing the main paragraph there. Let's see. No, maybe it's the next page.
And just to catch up too, I think we'd approved it, but for the
But
just the
for
few
these,
changes.
yeah.
Okay, good.
So it's actually
Yeah.
the last paragraph on page 2. We were, in the beginning of page 3, we were concerned about the relationship between purchasing and CFO. Let's see. Okay, I take it now. I take back page 3.
Page 3.
The last paragraph, the third paragraph on page 3, the Board of Ethics further question, and this was in there before, further question relationship between purchasing and CFO, independent, historically CFO has always not interfered with purchasing, mayor appoints, assembly confirms. Now this is where I've added stuff in. Termination of the purchasing officer must be approved by the mayor. Based on the testimony of Mr. Harris and Mr. Haddon, the Ethics Board concluded there was enough separation between the CFO's limited role in contract administration and the CFO's role as a division manager of the purchasing department to limit the potential for conflict of interest or undue influence.
Good.
Is that we needed a conclusory statement. I mean, our problem was our purchasing officer is in the chain of command under the CFO. Purchasing officer does all contracts. CFO does basically none. They've always respected that division, but we didn't have anything really. We needed more. But anyway, that we made a conclusion that CFO isn't very involved, is almost not involved in contract administration at all, whereas purchasing in, even though they're a role as a division manager.
Okay.
So does that
Yes.
line make sense to you guys?
No, that's
Okay.
good. I like it.
And then the last one is ACDA, so the last page. There we were going round and around about what he could do as an ACDA board member, because ACDA does all the development for the city, and that he emphasized that the CIRI board has no day-to-day involvement in the CIRI nonprofits, such as the community Cookielet Housing. But ACDA and Cookielet Housing are very likely to have projects together. So the last very long line of the sentence, this board, the ethics board, does not object to this involvement, but suggested that should ACDA propose to give direct support to Cook Inlet Housing, such as a grant, and this is where we added, or enter into a contract with any SERI entity at the ACDA board level, that Mr. Harris bring the matter back to the ethics board for further reconsideration. By the use of the term ACDA board level, the ethics board does not intend to monitor routine ACDA contracts with SERI entities. In other words, ACDA is its own corporation, has maintenance contracts, everything else, with probably SERI entities. We don't know. We don't care about those things because that's handled from an ACDA purchasing department. What we care about is contracts that come up to the ACDA board. Are we going to participate in a contract to do tennis courts? That has to come back to us. So if the contract comes up to the board level, now I thought I should probably ask Mr. Harris is, what are the ifs, ands, and buts of this? Is this as simple as I think it is? But other than that, we're saying, if they get a grant or a major contract, we do want to be involved because you are CFO and a board member of ACDA. Now, he's one of those probably code-appointed board members, or the mayor can appoint so many people. Yeah. But he's on a board that may be giving money to entities over which he's a board member.
Do we know what the threshold is for contracts going to the board versus being sort of standard no matter first week? Do we know contracts do go to the board?
I'm not sure. I'd have to ask a little bit.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, it's everything to getting Mr. Harris to give us more information. I'm just curious about is ACDA what are those?
The Anchorage Community Development Association. Parking lots.
Corporate entity are they?
Oh, they're a separate authority of the city.
Okay.
So they're us, but they're
municipal
separate.
Yes.
They've never incorporated.
Okay.
But
So
they
it's
could
technically a
have.
division of the community then. I'm just saying like legally.
Can I tell you, Becky, they're more separate than that.
Okay.
They're not a department or a division. They really are a separate entity. They have their own personnel rules, their own payroll, a lot of their own
I guess what I'm
things.
getting at is what's the source of, if they were a private corporation or if they were a nonprofit, we would have bylaws or some kind of internal governing document that would say contracts above this threshold go to the board.
Well, that's a good
approval,
point.
And
Maybe
contracts
they
below
do.
this are, discretionary decisions of the director or of the contracting department. Or whatever.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking for is what's the source of that division?
Right, exactly.
Or are we really looking for a materiality threshold?
Right.
Board level
And
or
how
not
can
board
we?
level?
Well, and the reason I tried to throw in the words board levels because he's on the board.
Yeah.
So what contracts do come to the board? We initially last meeting just said, meeting any contracts that are led to SERI entities. Well, that could be a lot. They've got a million little entities. So that's not what we're interested in, the janitorial contracts. We're interested in the big stuff. We're going to do a joint housing project.
Let's face it, we're relying heavily on his discretion and his ability to differentiate among different things. That was kind of the underlying this whole opinion in my
Well,
take
I
on it was.
think just to help over, we don't receive any contract or more than that contract in there. We just have to excuse themselves from that particular vote. We do that all the time. They do that all the time.
Are we effectively just saying we want to look at any new material contract? Because honestly, like the janitorial contract, if they don't currently use like a SERI entity for a janitorial contract, and they suddenly are like, hey, we're going to transition from our current service to SERI, we like them. But that seems to me like it could potentially be an ethical issue too, and that's probably a pretty major dollar number, depending on what they're putting. I don't know. Maybe janitorial is bad, but and it seems like any material new contract with a SERI entity could be a question.
But looking at Ted's point, normally we would rely on Mr. Harris to disclose his conflict and for that board to rule on it. So what more are we asking for? So maybe this goes too far.
Okay.
Because again, how do we find material? How do we any of that? So maybe this goes too far. So not put or enter into any contract with a SERI entity that. So maybe we just limit it to the direct support. Again, I think a grant to a SERI entity is a big deal myself. That's free money, here you get it.
That's right.
ACDA normally does not do that. They're not in the grant giving business, and one of the reasons the tennis court thing was so opposed was because you're just out of the blue going to give $800,000 to the tennis court to build a roof or something. So they're not in the grant giving business. How do we go, if they do a private-public partnership, how about that? Such as a grant or enter into a public-private partnership with any Siri entity, because that's a big thing. We're going to develop a building together.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that would be a way of so direct support to Siri or enter into a public-private partnership. I think actually that might really work. And then I would take out. Because I think it's Ted and you, David, are right that normally you rely on disclosure and board rules on it. So why are we?
Right, it's handled through the process already.
Well, are people comfortable with that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Okay.
The other question I have is, this is an advisory opinion, do we put that caveat that we had in the last one and this one also, that we're relying on information
Okay,
provided
sure.
to us by him?
Okay, sure.
That if the information is wrong, that
We're going to call this Lisa's caveat.
Yeah.
Forever.
Okay, have we already approved this, or this is up for approval right now?
I think it was just that I'm not sure whether we took a vote on it because it was just
Okay.
subject to these last few things.
All right, so I move to approve this letter.
'Cause if we approve it now and do it like the other one, then
Yep.
we can take it off the agenda.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Are we ready to approve this letter? Motion to approve the letter. Any objection? No. Hearing no objection, the letter's approved, and we'll go through the same process as the other one.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what do we have left?
Looking at the annual report, is that one of them?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
my deal.
That's the last.
Yeah, and I didn't have a chance. I did not look at it since our last meeting, and that was my job. So
And
I'm
I had
proposing.
one question to ask.
Okay.
you,
The
Okay.
latest copy is in everybody's binder.
Okay.
But
And you've sent it to me, so I'll
And I
find
sent
it.
it to you, yeah.
So I'll review that, and we'll bring this up again the next meeting,
Okay.
and hopefully we can approve it at the next meeting.
Yeah. Well, let's just make it a priority. Let's put
Yeah.
it like one of the first
No,
things
she's going to
on-
highlight my name on the next agenda, so I'll know. I'm going to get that little yellow tab on.
because
my
our
name.
little window where we were just going to be so timely, it's like
I really was all over that. Okay.
I think it's good. Yeah.
Do we have any? Let's see.
Oh, and let me just say, because Dee said that, it's super, super important. I know David's going to go over it, but super important that everybody kind of go over it because it represents what you all want to put out there.
And this is
so
also
it
a
needs
totally
to-
new.
Yeah, there needs to be some
Yeah.
agreement that, yes, I want to say that, or maybe you said that negatively, or you know what I mean? Whatever, okay?
Where you want it to fairly represent us.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, so where is it in here?
8A.
Okay, so I can take it out
Yes.
and then look at it. Okay, make
In
sure.
fact, I might do that too.
And by the way, I did read through it, and I really looked for substance in terms of the summary of the opinions, and I thought they were
Okay.
totally accurate.
That's the last page of the new one. So, yeah, don't take the whole thing because then you'll get all the old drafts.
Okay,
It's just the very
Just the
top
verse,
one.
yeah, the top part.
so anyway, I did quite a bit of substantive review, and I thought it was great.
Thank you for doing
Good.
that.
And it's 17 pages.
And you definitely need to give David the little yellow things to say. They're
Yeah,
very effective.
I deserve the yellow thing. I know
She
it's
did.
true.
She really did. I mean, she responded like within 5 minutes of my email, and she's just like, "Okay, remind me." Okay.
I'm going to skip over member comments. Any audience participation? There's no one from the audience here. Member comments. I want to make a quick member comment. Ted, I want to welcome Ted back to the board. We really, really value your input and your opinions, and I'm very excited to have you back. You're kind of part of the old guard, and I appreciate that very much because you're familiar with our process. And we've modified it a little bit while you've been gone, but you're going to slide right back in, and we're very happy that you're back. So thank you very much for coming back and volunteering all of your time and effort. Any other member comments that we have?
May I take this time to say what these are? I just pulled out the 2014 minutes and agendas. If you want them, take them. If you don't, I'll recycle them. So what you have in your binder now is just 2015 and then going forward.
Now, you have these on your, in file.
I have them in
If
file.
anything comes up, we can.
Right. Yes.
I'm sorry, what is this?
These are the minutes and agendas for the year of 2014. So now our binder
Okay.
will have 2015 going
Gotcha.
forward.
No, yeah,
Just- Yeah.
yeah, we're good.
Okay.
It's not one person reaches for it.
Right, I know. Okay, move to adjourn. Second. We're adjourned. Thank you.